good to go?
Okay, sounds good.
Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Talk to Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle C. Baker. And before we get started, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. And of course, this is season 4. So I do invite you to have a look at the 3 previous seasons. There may be some topics there that resonate with your reality today. So go have a look. They are timeless. And we're going to jump right in with a very important topic. It's something that I deal with quite frequently with families. And it's actually how I left the education system to go with my own private business to be able to help and support families that mostly have children on the spectrum. And we are specifically going to be talking, well, we're going to be touching on all of the spectrum, but specifically parents who have nonverbal children. There is added stress and added challenges there. So I have the wonderful Theresa Lyons with me today. Thank you so much, Theresa, for joining me.
Hello, I'm excited to be here.
That's great. So before we dive right into the topic, can you talk to us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I have a PhD in computational chemistry from Yale. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and my daughter was diagnosed with autism. So then my entire world, everything just went upside down and inside out. And and it took me a while to okay, get my bearing. And by a while, I mean a few years, right?
Yeah,
And I stopped working and really focused on understanding the science of what is autism, because when I started asking that question, I wasn't getting really good answers as I was expecting, since I had worked in the pharmaceutical industry. So I really had to come up to speed on what autism is, and then how do I help my daughter.
yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up because that is a reality for every parents that I worked with who get the diagnosis, and it just changes everything, even though you don't necessarily think it will. And from the outside as well, the outside of the home don't understand why all of a sudden you would just change everything around to be able to
Yeah.
support your child because there are no resources at that level or that information that you need as a parent at that level to be able to say, all right, I can trust somebody or, a team to be looking after my child. I kind of have to do it myself. So it's nice to have you on because you're going through it, you're living it, and I think your message is very important for people to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna talk. I mean, you did a lot of, obviously you have a science background, so you did a lot of research on the science behind it and all of that. But I wanted to bring up that we could kind of weave that into the conversation as well. But I wanted to talk about what parents go through, um, just to make it even more real as to the ups and downs and the inner conflicts that you go through and being exhausted and being worried and feeling guilty about the whole thing. So I'd like to talk a little bit about PTSD to start off with. And could you kind of let us know a little bit on how to recognize those signs of people don't think it can go that far, but the early signs, yeah.
So yeah, people don't really understand this, and neither did I until much later. And I didn't really fully understand how the nervous system works and how that really shapes our experience in life. And so, as with me, with anything, mm, everything starts with science. So I read a scientific article from a journal, right? This was not anyone's interpretation. I'm reading the clinical trials. And I came across this article that said for parents whose kids have autism with challenging behaviors, so this is more on the profound side of autism,
Yeah.
um, those parents have an increase of 20 to 30% for the parents themselves to develop PTSD from the experience of raising that child. And that's a scientific article. That was fact. And that really, I wouldn't have thought that things could go that far, as you were saying, to really get a PTSD diagnosis based upon all the experiences of raising a child with autism. But it happens. It happens pretty systematically. And there's enough of it that researchers are studying it and able to quantify, okay, what is the risk for a PTSD diagnosis for a parent, right? So these are things that our kids' doctors really should be looking at in us, but I don't think most people are aware of this. And then also, to talk about guilt a little bit, but guilt is so encompassing. I know me as a parent, I would never want to say I have PTSD because of my daughter. Like it just goes against everything what you think being a parent is. Like you're just not supposed to say certain things about your kids, right? And
You're
to
right.
say like you were so traumatic in raising you that now I have a PTSD diagnosis. I think many parents might shy away from really leaning into and exploring how they handled the stress because
Yeah.
in part it is how are we handling things? How are we processing? If we're just going to be kind of like stiff lipped and say, okay, we're just going to power through everything, nothing bothers me, you can do that for a while, but the nervous system and the body doesn't lie. And then you start to, and this is when you get into, signs you can start to think about, or maybe even your friends or family have sad things, like just kind of avoiding different things to
Yeah.
go to with your child, maybe because something traumatic happened. So maybe in the movies, right? They had a huge meltdown, and maybe a meltdown for autism, we use that word and we use challenging behaviors, but it might be maybe your child started biting you. Maybe they
Yeah.
started kicking you, pulling your hair. Like they just completely lost control over everything. And that is traumatic for the parent and the child. And so then you might start avoiding, oh, I'm not going to go to the movies with, my child because you're just scared. Like, I don't want that to happen again. Totally understandable, right?
Yeah.
But you can start to avoid different things. So places is usually what happens first because we associate the place with what happened with that child. Sometimes it's an event, um, sometimes it's a food, and sometimes the
Yeah.
food is actually a legitimate trigger, right? So there are different kids have different allergies, right? So it's not as if we're making all these things up in our mind. We have to be aware of when and any pattern these behaviors happen, but it's really just you start avoiding, and then you might start to become like a little numb. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
we don't really need to go out. Like, what's the point? It just always goes bad anyway. Right. So that's avoidance. And you just kind of start to withdraw from life. So that's one of the common experiences that with PTSD and raising a child with autism.
Yeah, and it's that isolation is real. A lot of parents will isolate and end up isolating the child too, even though many parents now, I think in the a decade ago when it was still not well known, we would just isolate altogether. But now, as we're getting the kids into activities, we want them to integrate and learn to socialize. But us as parents, we're isolating ourselves to kind of lick our wounds and recover. And I like that you brought up the physical aspect of it because we talk a lot about how draining it is emotionally and psychologically to deal with these meltdowns, to be hyper vigilant all the time at the park, at school, you know, but the physical is there, and there's a strength that comes with an autistic child that hits the and then as a parent to hold that back and not want to react to that, it's yeah, that's where the signs of PTSD can come. It's not abuse. We can't say that it's abuse because, but you're just so torn, um, and then you have to self-regulate because your child picks up off of your energy. So if you're
Yes.
escalating, they're escalating. It's just the impossible task. So it's a reality that I don't think unless you're not in it, you really don't understand.
Yeah. And the other thing is, so sleep then becomes a problem with PTSD, but also a problem with autism, right? So you might have these meltdowns and challenging behaviors and these traumatic events, because I think that's really what we should call it, not a meltdown. When they're at that level, they're really traumatic for both, for really anyone involved.
Yeah.
And then when sleep is a problem for your child, as it is in 80% of kids with autism, then you're not sleeping if your child's not sleeping. We know that is that's rule. And then what happens is we are less and less able to process our experiences, right? Because if we're not having REM sleep, we're not doing emotional regulation at night. We're not, that's what REM sleep is for. Deep sleep is for repairing our body physically. So if we had some type of physical challenge with our child, we need that sleep to repair the body. And then you need the REM sleep so that you can really process those emotions out. And if sleep is a problem, then you're not able to do that. And then you're just compounding problems in a bad way. And so having problems with sleep, even if, let's say, your child is sleeping, but now you can't sleep, then you have to start to say, okay, why can't I sleep? Right. And your mind might be racing. Your mind, you might have some nightmares. You might wake up actually with nightmares from a situation that has happened. You might start to get flashbacks, right? So these are all things with PTSD that we just many times think that's just what being a parent of a child encompasses, but you really have to take time for yourself and start to be aware of your nervous system. And it's something I did not think about. And I probably, to be honest, I probably would never have thought about all this stuff if things with my daughter weren't going in a good direction and I wasn't needed as much, right? So like when you know the science and you can really address different health issues, then the parent has that space to be like, "Ooh, okay, let me
Right.
get in touch with myself again," right? Because they were in crisis mode. So once you get this opportunity to get out of crisis mode, and there is, right, is sometimes it takes a lot of work, sometimes it takes a lot of educating and figuring out and going to different doctors and like, real intense focus. But when you can get past that, then that's really the time to notice that you might be on edge. You
Yeah.
might be, okay, when's the next seizure going to happen? When's the next like head through the wall going to happen? And your body feels it, but you would never be aware of it if things hadn't calmed down. And now you can start to reflect on yourself.
Yeah. And you bring a really good point because there's some periods sometimes where it does go really well. And all of a
Yeah,
sudden something triggers it that it could just be uh, entering the teenage years, let's say, or something where there's another aspect of it that's being thrown in. Now you're getting behaviors again and it triggers that
it definitely
trauma.
triggers.
It
Yeah.
triggers
So
the
if you
trauma.
feel that trigger,
Yeah.
then that's something to start to evaluate. It's not an automatic you have PTSD, right?
Right.
Everyone has a certain sense of history in our body, but really when it starts to interfere with aspects of our life, then that's when, really talking with someone and having a therapist all along is certainly something that is beneficial. I think it's
Yeah.
always great to talk things out with people, have just trusted people around you so that you don't isolate necessarily yourself. You might not go to certain situations with your child, which might make sense, right? We're not saying, okay, just go forth and do whatever. No, you have to be logical about it, but you also have to say, how am I caring for myself?
Yes.
And one of those things, just mentioning therapy, is there's another clinical trial, and this was small. So I just want to preference that this is a small. The whole topic of PTSD and parents of kids with autism is really just starting to evolve and be explored. And there was a clinical trial just this past year that had 7 parents. It was 5 moms and 2 dads. So I want everyone to understand this is not a mom or a dad thing. This is a parent thing. And they had official PTSD diagnosis from their child with autism who also had challenging behaviors. And they did EMDR therapy. So it's the eye movement desensitization, right? And so then it was within 5 to 7 appointments of doing EMDR that the parents officially lost their PTSD diagnosis.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I want parents to understand that, yes, this is trauma that we go through and our children go through. And we might end up in a place that is, just very reactive, right? So our body
Mhm.
is just always on edge, but it doesn't have to stay that way. So that's really the important thing for parents to understand is they can do different things to really reclaim that calm state that they
Yeah.
had, and they might even enjoy it more and appreciate it more now afterwards. But it's important to know that the research is there and there are different things to do. So it's not as if, okay, well, too bad. There are actually steps to take to reclaim that part of yourself.
Wow, that's really good to hear because especially when it comes to PTSD, we just all think that it's for a life thing, right?
Yeah, it doesn't
We're
have to be.
soldiers, and it doesn't have to be. So just to get that help when you're thinking, well, what's the point? Well, that is the point. You can actually get yourself out of it. I love that. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for
yeah,
sharing that. It's so important. That's
yeah.
what I love having you on because with the research you've done, with the science that you've done, it is more objective as well. But you did mention the crisis mode earlier. Could you explain a little bit or help us understand what happens and what to do when you do reach that crisis mode?
Sure. Crisis mode. How do you describe that?
Yeah, no worries.
Crisis mode is when you feel like you're just at the end of your rope.
Yeah.
And I think I can describe it more from an emotional standpoint. You think you're at the end of your rope, you don't know what to do, you can't really make a decision. It just seems like everything is overwhelming. So you can't, in many ways, you can't even figure out how to get out of crisis mode. It
Yeah.
feels very powerless, right? Because you're in crisis mode because something is happening to your child, right? So it's I always call it a two-body problem, right? So like you have to figure out what's going on, but then you have to somehow incorporate whatever the solution is into a second person, right? And so always look at health first, right? So
Yeah.
if a child has these consistent meltdowns and challenging behaviors, what is causing it, right? So
Yeah.
are they sleeping well? If they're not sleeping well, then that's like step number one, right? Like we've
Mhm.
got to figure out how can everyone be sleeping, right? So there, you could start to look at vitamin D status. So sometimes it's as simple, and I know this sounds like it can't be, but for some kids, it is so simple as getting vitamin D up to adequate levels. Not just like basic levels, right? So 30, if you do a blood test, 30 is what many conventional medicine doctors say. Yeah, that's good, right? But for autism, the kid's immune system is really revved up in many cases. So optimal values are really between 60 and 70. Functional medicine has that. And so sometimes it is so simple as vitamin D status. It might be removing food that is causing, right? You start to notice, oh, gee, wow, whenever they eat anything with tomatoes, that
Right.
night is horrible, right? So then it's like, okay, let me stop the tomatoes, but it doesn't stop there. It's like, okay, let's stop the tomatoes. And you see, okay, great. Wow, it's been a great week or 2 weeks so far. Then you want to ask yourself, okay, what was causing that besides the tomatoes? What about
Yeah.
those tomatoes? Is it a digestive issue? Is it, like histamines, inflammation, right? These are the health questions that you can start to ask so that then you can do something to really get you out of crisis mode. And that's the important part to focus on is how can we resolve what is causing this crisis?
Hmm. Wow, that's nice. Well, it's nice to hear that, yeah, there's a process there that because once you are in crisis mode, you really don't see a way out.
It's
You're,
hard to think. It is
it
so
is.
I've lived this myself, but then over the years I've worked with parents in 21 different countries one-on-one. We would meet with them once a week, right? So I was really in the weeds with everyone, and it is about having that partner so that they can see things, they can encourage you. Sometimes you're getting out of crisis mode, something happens and then you feel like, oh my goodness, nothing's ever going to change, and we're just so close, right? But that's really defeatist, right? So
Yeah.
it's you want to have people around you, whether it's family, friends, or coaches that can say, wait a second, is it really as bad? Let's objectively look at that. Because when you're in crisis mode, like the only thing you see is negative. So you
That's
definitely need realistic, quality people who can show you a true mirror of the situation. I know for me, when I don't sleep, I used to be able to do this no problem when my daughter was younger. Now, if I don't sleep, it's mainly my fault, right? Like
mm.
for me, I'm waking up for a variety of different reasons. And when I don't sleep well, the next day, I think everything is going wrong. It doesn't matter. Like my brain just cannot see anything good. So this has happened so many times where I'm just like, all right, Theresa, you cannot listen to yourself today at all. You just can't listen to it. Like catch those thoughts and then just remind yourself you didn't sleep, because then you're going to create this like emotional ball of just life is going terrible when it's really not, you know?
Yeah.
So
And it's usually then that you're triggering your child into something that you would.
oh, yes, we didn't even get into that. Yes, 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 right? So the two body problem, right? This is where it gets really complex in the sense that
That's
you
it.
do, even during meltdowns and challenging behaviors, you have to somehow be calm. And you can't do it every time. Like
Yeah.
you just can't. Sometimes you end up losing it. And it that's then where the additional guilt comes in. Like, oh, I should have handled that situation better. I should have done this. I should have done that. And sometimes you just have to give yourself grace and say, I did the best I could. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, if I had sleep for a year, would I be able to handle that situation differently? Yeah, no problem. But that's not the reality. So really having grace with yourself to not spiral down and make things worse by having guilt
Yeah.
is really important.
It's so true that I worked with the parents that I worked with, some of them are saying, I'm not a bad parent. And then you're like, no, you're not. The fact that you care and the fact that you feel guilty shows that you actually are, you're just human. And that's why we need to take care of this human so that you can take
Yes,
care of your
yes, yes,
child.
yes.
Do you have any tips or recommendations or little things that we could do to move us away from guilt because no matter what diagnosis you get, you will start feeling guilty. Do you have any kind of wisdom you could share with us on moving us away from that guilt?
I think part of it is first recognizing those emotions, right? And so this is where you can kind of talk yourself out a little bit. I don't recommend going from like feeling guilty to try and feel like joyful and amazing
Mm,
and like that's, realistically is not going to happen, right? It's too
exactly.
much of a jump. So it's always like, okay, if I'm feeling guilty, if I'm feeling frustrated, if I'm feeling annoyed, if I'm feeling angry, if I'm feeling tired, the first step is really just, what am I feeling? What are those emotions? Let me really just understand it, and then say, okay, I'm feeling guilty. All right, why am I feeling guilty? Because there was a meltdown and I didn't handle it well. Okay. Have you handled meltdowns well in the past? Yeah. Okay, I have. And do you think you're perfect in everything at all times? No, definitely not, right? Like a mess up. So is it understandable for you to mess up on one meltdown and maybe not have been calm and patient?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's one. Is that how you react all the time? No, it's not. I've been really good the past like 2, 3 times, but I don't know what happened with this. Okay, so you had one time where you didn't mess up. Now, what can you turn this into? Uh, well, maybe I need to apologize to my child. Okay,
Mhm.
what is that going to do? Well, it'll teach them that people aren't perfect and that people lose control and they do things they don't really want to do. And then there are consequences. So you can start to model and you can see I've shifted that guilty feelings. And these are conversations you have in your head or with
Yeah.
someone who can help
What
you do this, right? But
Yeah.
it's not about, oh, you can do the next one better, or like it's you have to shift yourself and kind of I call it like getting neutral. Just
Yeah.
get neutral about it and just kind of play with it in your mind. And then you get to that point of like, all right, yeah, I do need to apologize. Okay, so let me go apologize to my kid for XYZ. And let me also say that at least I did
Hmm.
ABC good. and that I always love them. And you can really start to model that regulation so that you can tell them, okay, next time I'm going to try and catch myself when I get irritable, right? Like, or something like that. And then be accountable. So
Yeah.
next time there's a meltdown, maybe you handle it perfectly. And then the time after that, you start to get a little irritable. But you can say, oh, wait a second. I'm getting irritable. Okay, give me a minute. Let me, like, the child's melting down, but they're still aware of things. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, let me just take a moment and breathe. You might just need a couple breaths, and then you can help your child. But they're learning now different techniques, and they're learning, how can I handle when my emotions are so big I can't control them? So you
Yeah.
can turn it into something that's learning, even if it's not ideal of how you want to be as a parent.
Yeah. I love that. And that brings us right into parents being their child's first and best teacher is through
Yeah.
modeling like that. And yes, we're not perfect. And yes, I will get triggered as well. And that conversation, I think, I'll tell parents, you're not going crazy. These are the kind of conversations you need to be having in your head. This, okay, what's really going on here? It might not even be what you think it is, or okay, why am I reacting like this? Is this really related to this situation, or is it something else that's just kind of piled on? Uh,
Right.
yeah, and then
And
I
that's where
think,
PTSD does come in, right?
yeah,
So with PTSD, reactions can sometimes be much larger than what you anticipate, right?
yeah,
So this is why really getting to know yourself is important. So that irritability and those angry outbursts that are at a level that don't seem appropriate, right? So
yeah,
so that's when parents really need to think about, okay, how am I de-stressing? What am I doing here? Because I can't keep just trying to power through things, because things are accumulating. My nervous system is overwhelmed, and it's just not sustainable, because then you become a person you don't want to be. And then you end up really resenting the whole situation even more. Right. So it's really about, in many ways, self-care, as
yeah,
contrary as that might sound, and really starting small with, all right, let me take a walk for 5 minutes, let me read a book,
yeah.
what am I doing that brings me joy? Can I even laugh anymore? A person might be in such avoidance mode that they don't go out to coffee with friends anymore, they don't call people on the phone anymore, they just don't have the energy to do that. And it's really important then to focus on yourself first, because the other part of that research of those 7 parents was 5 of those children then reported better emotional regulation themselves.
Uh-huh.
So the parents lost their PTSD diagnosis. Nothing about PTSD was done with the child, but the child then had a different interaction with their parent because their parent was more regulated and in a different frame of mind. So it's not, many times parents don't want to take time or spend even a little money on anything that nourishes themselves. But it's really important for parents to understand that when you do that, your child sees that and then they benefit from it as well.
It's an investment in a way, yeah. And I think the way I see it too is that's the other side of guilt. Going out with friends for coffee, you start feeling guilty because it feels like all you're talking about is the stress that you're going through, or you're talking about issues, and you would like to talk about so much more, but that's just your reality, You
Well,
like to,
sometimes I kind of have a rule in my life. I don't really focus on complaining too much, especially like when I'm going out with friends. I'll say, like, listen, I don't want to talk about kids at all. I don't want to hear about your kids. I don't want to talk about mine. Like, let's just leave the mom role somewhere else for a moment and just be in like this kind of space. We can talk about fashion. We can talk about, an upcoming festival day. Like, there's so much we can talk about. Just like, let's leave that. And
let's
and
just,
complaining, there's a very fine line between venting
mm,
and complaining, and
yes,
then complaining becomes a habit. So when
yeah,
complaining becomes that habit, you're just circling and circling. And believe it or not, sometimes then people don't want to hang out with you. You might not be the avoiding one, but they might start avoiding you because all you're doing is perseverating. on what's
Yeah.
wrong and not taking action on trying to get out of that cycle. So it's definitely important to realize, okay, how long have I complained about XYZ? What have I done to
Yeah.
really change that? And if you haven't, then you really want to ask yourself, why haven't I? And it might be because you're stressed and overwhelmed and all of that. And then the issue becomes, all right, how do I restore myself so that then I could think clearly about, the one of the top two problems that my child is facing. So sometimes you really just have to start with yourself.
Yeah. So true, because it is easy to fall into that victim mentality. And that's what you were saying earlier is so important to have the people around you that will support you where you need it. Because I've noticed too in some of the group work, like the group parent groups or chats, where it's just complaining. Everybody's just kind of outdoing
Yeah.
themselves. And I was like,
Ugh,
you don't want to be there. You want to move away from somewhere where you can see the positive, like you were saying at the beginning of the episode, is just focus on what is going right. And I think that's why
yeah.
it's so important
And
to
then,
find the right people for you and
yeah,
make that switch. Because, yeah, there will be moments where you can't see the good stuff, and that's okay.
definitely.
But you shouldn't be staying in that, recognize it, let it pass, and
Oh,
move on to the good stuff. We need to address the negative stuff, but not to stay and bathe in it, because
yeah.
it's
And
not a
the
good
same
thing.
with guilt. We
That's it.
can experience it, but there are some parents who never let it go, and that
Mhm.
becomes part of their identity. I
Yeah.
didn't do a good job as a parent, and I don't do this well, and I don't do that, and my kid's never going to do this. And you can just wrap yourself up in all of those negative emotions, and then that is who you become. And
Yeah.
I could certainly say your child probably does not want you to be that as a result of them. There's no child who's like, I'm going to do things that cause my mom or dad to just totally lose who they are and become
Yeah.
this victim. So it's not what our kids want for us.
No, and then you touched on something very, very important there, because children will never see fault in the adults. So if there's something that's troubling the adults, they automatically think it's them. And when you have a
Yes.
child who has a diagnosis, they know that they are different. They know that they may not be the family portrait that their parents hoped they would be. They will take that even harder on themselves, and that's what can also trigger other challenging
Yes.
behaviors. So
Yep.
it's such
Yeah.
a loop that's very very hard to get out of. So yeah, taking care of yourself does a world of difference for your child, because then they see that it's, I'm not good enough. I'm a
Yeah.
burden to
Yeah.
my parents. I'm this, I'm that. You're not dumping that on them, but that's what they're getting off of
That's
it.
what
So
they're
it's
internalizing from their perspective. That's an excellent point
and
to
when you're
make sure.
dealing with
So,
even Yeah, when you're dealing with a nonverbal child who can't express that, they still understand everything that's going on.
oh
That's another
yes,
thing. It's not because they don't
100%.
speak verbally that they don't understand. They're catching everything else. They're a lot more uh, in tune with nonverbal languages, so they pick up a lot more, and they internalize a lot more. So it's important to keep that.
I would say one of the most important things to know and understand about a person with autism who is non-speaking is they are learning and observing all along. So most of the times, the issue isn't with comprehension, it's with expression.
Yeah,
So they're learning, they're thinking, they're listening. If the parent is complaining or complaining on the phone or something like that, and the child can hear,
yeah,
even though they're not speaking, they're hearing and understanding what is being said. So it's really important for parents to understand how kids can really internalize things, right? And then what does that do to the child? It gives them more stress. Sleep might be difficult. They might be thinking, oh man, I'm such a burden to my family. They would be better off if I wasn't around. Why?
yeah,
And they might start getting angry at their body. Like, why can't I talk? Why can't I move my mouth? This is so annoying, right? And so then they can start internalizing a lot of things, and they don't have the ability to say, okay, I need to talk to a therapist, or I need to go hang out with my friend and vent and stuff like that. So it is really important, and that's why it is a two-body issue there, and
Yeah.
it's more complex than many things just because two people or more, it's really like a family. um
Yeah.
but that's what makes it certainly complex.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's an important message for the extended family, for even to schools and teachers, or even the parents or friends of those children, that what you
Yeah,
say is understood, and that child is, so if you're talking like that to your partner or your own child, so just to be mindful of the words that you're using when you're talking about that child is so important. There's so
yeah,
much we can unpack
there's
there.
so much.
We have like maybe 5 other episodes we could use on that, but uh, I I will invite actually the listeners, because I know this will touch a lot of families, but you do have a platform for parents. You do work, this is the work that you do. Can you talk a little bit more of people if they're interested to know more about what you do, or working with your recommendations on how you can switch to a more positive outlook? Can you share that with us a little bit?
Sure. So I've created something called the Navigating Autism platform, and it's based on the Navigating Autism Matrix. So there's 7 categories for parents to really understand and take action. And what we do is we organize the science. So it's not my opinions, right? So you really haven't heard me give my opinions on the science. You've heard me share my emotional journey, yes. But I teach parents the science in this platform so they can really analyze, okay, is this relevant? Is this a functional medicine test that I should do? Okay, I'm going to do it. Let's order it. Teach me how the results, what they actually mean, who can I then work with. So it's all encompassing in how to really get quality information so that parents can make really good decisions for their child. And then we also have board certified health coaches that really help with the mindset, because that's something that things don't change just in 7 days, right? This is
Yeah.
not a course of antibiotics for 10 days and everything's fine, right? So, yeah, and certain parents might be starting in a very negative place. So it's really important for parents to understand that mindset is part of this whole process. So we have health coaches that work with the parents one-on-one. There's also groups that the parents get put in so that you can share wins and just really keep that mindset in focus so that when you have a bad day, right? We all do when things don't go the way we want them to go. It's not detrimental. It's just a
Mm.
little bit of a pit stop, and you keep on going. And we do have parents from all over the world. I know you're in Canada, so we do
Yeah,
have Canadian parents. This is not just a US centric thing. So if parents are interested, they can certainly go to my website and find out more.
that's great. I'll make sure to put that information in the description as well, so people can have a look at Navigating Autism, that platform. And if they want to follow you, because I know you're also on social media, what are your
Yeah.
handles there? Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a YouTube channel for over 10 years. So there
Wow.
is lots of science that I have taught over the years. And I keep putting out more and more quality science so that parents know. So things like PTSD and EMDR, and this is all important information for parents to know, because they might be thinking they're the only one who is, having this persistent feeling of guilt or shame or avoidance. And then when you hear the science saying, no, a parent of a child with autism has an increased risk of PTSD diagnosis. Oh, wait a second, right? It gives more
Yeah,
validation into what you feel. And it's also important then for them not to feel like it's something bad to say about their parenting experience.
that's right. And it's so important because we mentioned crisis mode, and when you're in that mode, there's information out there, but when you're in that mode, you don't have the capacity to start looking. Like
Yes, yes,
you're
yes,
just
yes, yes.
trying to make it through the day. I'm not gonna start to Google, what's wrong with me. Like it's
Yep.
just, so to
Yeah.
know that there is a platform out there where they can just go and look and binge watch if they have to, but just to that there's something and it's also to decipher what's real from what's not real in terms of information. Now we're talking about science-based, somebody who's lived it, both professionally and personally, so it makes a difference. And yeah, you're not alone, and it's important to go out there and find
Yeah.
your platform. So I will put that information as well on there. Before
Awesome.
we wrap
Thank
up,
you.
I ask I ask my guests this question. I can't remember if I warned you about it, because
Uh-oh.
I do ask this one
Always love when
question.
this happens.
Yes, there's. I'm going to really put you on the spot. I will explain it a little bit. There's a child who was doing a little girl who was doing a school project where she was interviewing adults, and she asked the question that all adults ask children, but she thought it was just the protocol. It's like a social thing an
Okay.
etiquette thing. So she was asking the adults what they wanted to be when they grow up, and she wasn't getting
Uh,
the responses that she was thought. And when she interviewed me, I gave her the answer because I'm just a big kid. And she was all happy about it. She told her mom, "So you see, mom, somebody would get it." So I promised her I would ask all the people I interviewed that question. So I'm going to put the spot on you now and ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I'm pretty happy doing what I'm doing
Yeah.
right now. I
So,
I have always loved teaching. I've always loved science, and I've now been able to do that, and really have a meaningful change on people's lives. So I love when parents post comments on the videos like, "This made a huge difference, and I took this and showed it to my doctor, and they
yeah.
agreed, and now we're doing this." So I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. It was not planned. So if you asked me about this when I was a kid, this is not what I would have said. If you asked me this 20 years ago, this is not what I've said. And now I definitely can answer that. However, in the true essence of that question, right, you can tap into to being a child. Um, One thing I definitely would like to be at some point in my life is a coffee barista.
Love it.
Because I think I've had a few baristas who will give me coffee and they just make my day, where they're just so positive and have a blessed day. It is great to
Yeah.
see you. And you get this cup of coffee, but you just get such like warmth and connection. And so if there is something, I would be a barista, and I would be serving people with such a smile, and people would be coming back not for the coffee but for like the good
For
vibe,
you.
and starting that day. So two
I
answers
love
for you.
I love it. This is what I love asking that question, because, like you said, it could be different 5 years from now. It could be
Oh
like it's
goodness,
just
yes.
constantly evolving, and that's what we are as adults. We can't think that we've done what we were supposed to do. We're still growing. But I love that you said
Yeah.
that, because I am a barista right now. I've decided to take on it just to get myself out of the house. I'm like, I need something, and that's exactly what it is. You do these little designs. They're all happy to see. They're going off on their day with the cup that you made. So it's a lot of
Awesome.
fun, even if it's a crazy environment. I've never really had like that typical cranky customer. Like they're just happy that you're gonna hand them
It's because
over.
you're happy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I 100% recommend it if that's what you want to give a try. Yeah,
Definitely.
it is
Yeah,
rewarding.
making
It's
people happy.
exhausting, but it's rewarding. I love that. Thank you so much. Before again, we really do. I could keep you on a couple more hours, but is there anything else you'd like to add? Maybe that words of encouragement, or just to wrap it up for our listeners.
Sure. I would say that they're in a very difficult situation,
Mhm.
and they're handling it with grace and ease, especially if they're listening to this episode, listening to you, trying to figure out how to do things differently. That really just shows how much you love your child. And that's really all that matters.
Yeah, that's so important to hear. Somebody needs to hear that today, and I'm glad you said it. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Anytime you
My
want to
pleasure.
come back on, I know that some people will probably want
Definitely.
to know more. You're more than
Yeah.
welcome to come on. But thank you so much. And again, I'll add all of the information in the description so people can reach you if they want to know more about your work or follow you on YouTube to get access to more resources. I really do appreciate you coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And for everybody listening or watching, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. Don't forget to go check out Theresa's work as well. Check out the description box there to get access to it. And until next time, stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll talk soon.